the British just landed Storm Shadow missiles deep inside Russia. Russia is now within its rights to retaliate against Britain, which is itself a nuclear power and which is itself a part of a bigger nuclear alliance. These are very, very dangerous times, Colonel.
Oh, they are. There's no question about it. The problem in the West is very simple. We have absolutely, continually, grossly underestimated Russian military power. We have ignored anything that the Russian leadership has said for at least 2 decades. Whenever they have made a plea for understanding their position vis-a-vis NATO, why they did not want NATO on their borders, why they would react strongly against such action, we simply refuse to listen. And right now, I think President Trump privately would like to see an end to this, but President Trump is unwilling to do what is required to end the conflict, and that is to admit a couple of things. First of all, President Biden's decision to build up the Ukrainian military for a major war against Russia was a serious mistake. Not only a mistake, it was a strategic error. President Trump knows that to be the case, but for some reason he's reluctant to say that. And again, I blame this on his donors. And so he's decided that since he cannot formally disengage from the conflict in Ukraine, he's going to simply turn away from it. The problem is he cannot abdicate his responsibility as the leader of NATO to the Europeans because of what you have just described. The leadership in London, in Paris, in Berlin, and I would argue Warsaw, is irresponsible. They don't know what they're doing. They're playing a very dangerous game. They are pushing harder than ever against the Russians. It is only President Putin's determination to avoid a war with NATO and the United States that keeps it from growing much worse. Now, I don't know what the future holds, but I think that President Trump, as I said, would like to turn away from it and focus elsewhere, primarily the Middle East, where I think he believes the ceasefire is meaningful. I think it's an illusion, and nothing has fundamentally changed in the Middle East. But he believes that for the moment. And at the same time, he's turning his attention to Venezuela, thinking that he can simply ignore what happens in Eastern Europe. I don't think he can, and I agree with you. What the British have just done, which is not new, they've done these things in the past, is very, very dangerous. But again, Putin is the adult in the room. The people in London, Paris, and Berlin and Warsaw cannot be characterized as adults because if they were, they would not do these things. It makes no sense.
But if can only do these things based on, and this is the conundrum that you're describing, it's only the guarantee that makes NATO meaningful at all. Britain has no army, has no navy. Its navy is stuck together by glue, and its army, if you take out all the clerks and haters and medics and the rest, would be scarcely over 40,000 strong. The same with the armies on the European mainland. They cannot go to war with Russia and can only threaten war with Russia on the premise the United States would have to. Trump, I agree with you. I think Trump wants this war to end. The barking chihuahuas and poodles and dachshunds in Europe very definitely don't. But if Trump doesn't break with them and put his foot down, this is going to go on and potentially get worse and worse, isn't it?
I agree with you, unless you remove the people who are governing in London, Paris, and Berlin in particular. And I think it's reaching the point in all 3 countries where the population genuinely needs to do that. They need to demand change in government. Now, in the meantime, sadly, I think President Trump is demonstrating that he is very much a politician, contrary to what he wants everybody to think, because he wants to be a little bit pregnant. He doesn't really want to bring the child to fruition and take responsibility for it, but he'd like to be pregnant. In other words, he wants to be popular with everyone, he wants to get along with everyone, and he doesn't understand exactly what you described. He is the de facto leader of NATO. And if they want to break with him by insisting on carrying on this war, then he should put them in that position. Because there's no reason for us to keep 100,000 U.S. troops from Lithuania to Romania sitting around, training from time to time, eating lots of food and costing lots of money. They are not going to march into Ukraine. They are not going to fight Russia. That's quite clear. So he ought to get them out and bring them home and be done with it. But he's reluctant to take that decision. And remember, again, he's not someone who studies the issues. He doesn't really understand the roots of the war in Ukraine. I don't think he really cares. I think he thinks it's a bad thing and would like to end it. But unless you understand why it happened to begin with, how can you end it in a way that makes sense? The Russians want to settle this thing. They want a new security arrangement for Europe. It makes infinite sense. We should have had that 20, 30 years ago. But instead of pressing ahead with that, he's backed away. You can't do that, but that's exactly what he's done. It's like having no one in the locomotive, and the locomotive is headed down the tracks at high speed. It's not a good answer.
What's the reason for these people that crowded round Trump and let it be known in no uncertain terms that they did not want peace? Is it, as Tucker Carlson has been saying, that this has been a money laundering operation, that not just the military-industrial complex, but the politicians themselves have enriched themselves with corrupt practices, with all these billions, tens, scores of billions of dollars washing around unaudited?
The great Lou Dobbs once said that America has the best government money can buy. And I think we know that to be the case. We're currently governed by a collection of billionaires. You can call them oligarchs, whatever you like. And President Trump has demonstrated routinely since he took office that his administration is, quote unquote, a very transactional administration. You would like to be the ambassador to Lower Slobovia, pay your $2 million to me, and you get to be the ambassador to Lower Slobovia. Tell me what you want, and if you pay enough money, I'll see to it that you get it. That's effectively what's been going on. And these billionaires are the same ones that want to subjugate the Middle East. They want to create Israeli hegemony backed by U.S. military power all over the region. They want the same thing in Ukraine. They want to destroy Russia. Why these people are committed to these things would take us an hour to explore. But the point is, the same people pushing these bad wars and bad policies are at work in Venezuela. They're at work in the Middle East. They're at work in Eastern Europe. There's no easy way to get around it. And President Trump's problem is he owes his position in the White House to these people.
Yeah, but he is there and he can't run again. So, eaten bread is soon forgotten, as the Irish say. It's a bit of a puzzle that he's not more interested in what his legacy will be. I mean, if you could leave office as the guy who halted the potential for World War III in Europe, that would be a very considerable feather in your cap.
But he is preeminently concerned about optics, the way things look. And he believes that if he states it, it's true. If he tells someone to do something, he believes they're off and doing it. My experience with him was that he doesn't realize that simply because he tells somebody to do something, they may or may not do it. And if they don't do it, he doesn't hold anybody accountable. There's no price to be paid. You can't run a government that way. You can't run anything that way. Where there is no accountability, there's no performance. He doesn't seem to understand that. But he wants to feel good. He likes others around him to feel good. His favorite thing is to be on permanent campaign. He loves to talk to large audiences and interact with them. What he doesn't like to do is sit down, listen to a detailed briefing of some importance. Now, there is some good news. It looks like He was briefed on the Tomahawk, its limitations, the small numbers available, the problems with it. And he finally decided, well, perhaps I shouldn't press ahead with that. Everybody thinks it's because President Putin told him that this would sour Russian-American relations, and it was viewed in Moscow as an escalation in the conflict, and they would have to respond. But I don't think that was it. I think he was rather surprised when he discovered we don't have that many, and the ones that we have are only available to be launched from the ground for the Ukrainians. And if we do that, we have to put our soldiers, our personnel, if you will, on the ground, executing the mission, planning it, and so forth. I think he finally decided this is a bad idea. Well, that's a good thing. I'm damn glad he decided that, because it was a very stupid idea. But that's not enough. And when President Putin talks to him, President Putin likes to think of him as the leader of NATO. And he's very frustrated because he can't do that, because there's no evidence that President Trump will put his foot down. Just as there's very little evidence that he's going to do anything to restrain Mr. Netanyahu, we don't see much evidence he's going to restrain Starmer or Macron or Merz. But he should, given his position, but he doesn't do it.
I was in Moscow briefly on my way to China, 24 hours or so. There's a lot of what you might call Trump-supporting Americans there, a considerable number, in fact. I won't embarrass them by adumbrating, but the signs are that Trump really does want to improve relations with Russia. It's perfectly possible to imagine sanctions on Russia being lifted in America before anywhere else. It's perfectly possible to imagine RT being back on the air in America while still being banned in Europe. These are strange times, Colonel.
Listen, George, President Trump wanted to normalize relations with Russia. He sent a team to Saudi Arabia shortly after he was elected, and they had good meetings in Saudi Arabia. The opportunity to normalize relations with Russia is there. Now, I don't know how much longer that's going to last if things get worse in Ukraine, which I'm afraid at this point they may. So I agree with you 100%. The problem for President Trump is this. He was elected preeminently to restore economic productivity and prosperity at home in the United States. That's what everyone that voted for him wants. That hasn't changed. No one voted for an invasion of Venezuela. No one voted for extending the war in Ukraine. And no one is interested in fighting Israel's war of conquest in the Middle East. That's all nonsense. So where is the disconnect? The disconnect is back to where we started. Money. Everything's about money and power. Money breeds power and influence. He's made promises to get where he is. He's trying to deliver, and it's disastrous for him. He needs to stand up and say, I'm the president of the United States. I have obligations to the American people. This is what I promised. I've got to deliver. Well, that would require him to shed his overseas commitments completely. He would be compelled to sign off on the best deal that he could get for the Ukrainians. He would be compelled to tell Mr. Netanyahu, I can't support your genocidal practices in Gaza or the West Bank or anywhere else. And by the way, whatever is wrong in Venezuela, I'm perfectly willing to deal with Maduro. Maduro has offered us a stake in his oil and gas industries, and I'm going to take it. That's what he would do. He's obviously not a free agent.
Let's talk about some of these other theaters then, Colonel. We know that the Holy Land is a place of miracles, but it would be the mother of all miracles if Jared Kushner, the property developer, was able to deliver us from a conflict that has lasted now for 77 years, a conflict in which the American and British, for that matter, political systems have become deeply corrupted by one side's lobby. It would be a miracle if Tony Blair as Governor General of Gaza, it would be a miracle if Blair was able to deliver peace, certainly peace with justice. I might be, I wasn't ever at a university. I left school at 16 to work in a factory. It might just be beyond me or above me, but I honestly cannot see where they think this is going. It's not going to solve the problem. The Palestinians are still there. Their rights, their legal demands are still extant and now unsatisfiable. So how does all this end up with peace?
It doesn't. And that's my bottom line. I think the truth is as following. When this is over, you will have either Palestine or Israel, but you won't have both. And I've spent time in Israel. I actually like the Israelis personally. I thought very highly of their senior military leaders, but they've made it very clear that the only outcome that is acceptable to them is for Israel to grow larger and stronger at the expense of the Palestinians, their homes, and their position inside Israel. They have reasons that are demographic and reasons of strategy. The Israeli state believes that they are most secure when the rest of the region is balkanized, when it is divided and people are killing each other. They like that because they translate that into security for Israel. I see no evidence for that mentality changing. And I think people have to understand that I think still, even at this point, at least 80% of the Israeli population supports that. They may not like Mr. Netanyahu. I don't know of anybody who does. But that doesn't make any difference. He's viewed as a man of intelligence, as a man who is ruthless enough to make all of this happen. And we are regarded as the subordinate vassal of Greater Israel. And they expect us to support them regardless of whatever they do. Thus far, that's exactly what we've done.
Well, I watched a video of Ted Cruz today. Of where else would he be? In Israel. And another pastor from Christians for Israel or some other non sequitur like that. And the message was that Israelis, Jews actually, the pastor said, Israelis, Ted Cruz said or implied, are not just the chosen people, the superior people, and the rest of us, including the United States of America, explicitly stated at this conference today, are above the rest of us, and their interests must prevail. It's difficult for sane, rational people to compute all that, Colonel. How did we get to a stage where one of the most senior politicians in America, Ted Cruz, is openly stating that it's not America first, it's Israel first?
Worshipping at the altar of Israel is financially very rewarding, George. I can't emphasize that enough. When we talk about these wars, you have on the one hand this sort of money laundering scheme that Tucker Carlson rightly described, but you have to look at the bank accounts. There are some investigations underway of senior senators who've received millions of dollars as a result of this, what we call laundering operation. But it's more than that. If you're a senior officer in the military and you're a strident advocate for Israel and whatever it wants, which amounts to perpetual conflict with its neighbors in the region to establish their hegemony, when you retire, you are rewarded by membership in financial firms in New York City, by joining boards of directors in banks, by being appointed officers in the defense industries, by becoming enshrined as a notable personality or expert in one of the so-called think tanks in Washington. And all the think tanks are owned by the same people. They're not think tanks, they're advocacy tanks. But the point is that everyone has figured out, if you want to get rich and you want to be rewarded, be on the right side. And so that's why there is no shortage of people willing to step forward and do this. The danger for someone like President Trump is that there's an inexhaustible supply of sycophantic generals who will tell him whatever he wants to hear because it's financially rewarding to do so. The problem is, at some point, it's going to become militarily disastrous and strategically catastrophic for us. When that happens is anybody's guess, but I think we're closer to it now, as you mentioned at the outset, than perhaps we have been in decades.
My God, I wish you were the president. Colonel, one last question. I suspect that I'm more sympathetic to the Venezuelan and revolution than you are, but we may share.
That's not true. That's not true. You know. That's not true, George. There was a Macgregor involved with Simon Bolivar. He was kind of a rogue, but he had quite a reputation. He fought in the revolution.
Well, I think you and I might need to head down there together. We could be the new Scots guards of the Venezuelan
Well, there's
revolution.
no reason, George. There's no reason for a war with Venezuela. This is nonsense. There's no reason to invade that place. And if we go into it and we're brutal and we kill people and we do damage, Venezuela is going to become the rallying point for millions of people all over Latin America who hate us already.
Yeah.
We'll see 100,000 paramilitaries from Brazil and Colombia pour into the place. It'll be a never-ending disaster. It'll go on forever. The big problem we have is the same one. Back in 1960, I think it was late 64, early 65, the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, called the Supreme Commander of NATO, an Army four-star. And he asked him, General, how long do you think it'll take us to get the 101st Air Mobile Division into Vietnam? He said, I don't think it'll take very long to get them in. The question is, how long will it take us to get them the hell out? Well, of course, Secretary McNamara didn't like that answer and said thank you and hung up the phone. That's our problem. No one ever asked the question, okay, why are we going in? And then saying, well, this is the mission. Can you explain the mission? How are we going to do it? What's it going to look like when we complete it? There's no emphasis on that. The emphasis is just get everyone in. Push everybody in. We'll figure it out once we're on the ground. It's a catastrophe. It doesn't work.